Welcome to Elevate with Emily. This YouTube channel is all about elevating yourself as an individual, becoming authentic, genuine, and the healthiest version of yourself. Not only will that help you as an individual, but it will help you in all the relationships you have, not just romantic relationships with a boyfriend, a fiance, or a spouse, but also in your relationship as a parent or a child or a friend. There are ways for you to improve and grow, and I am so passionate about that. I am so passionate about personal growth, and one of the best ways to grow as an individual is through relationships. There are aspects of ourselves that don't come out or aren't seen until we're in a relationship. For example, I am a pretty independent, strong, healthy person in general, right? Obviously not perfect, but it wasn't until I started to like someone and was starting to date them that I recognized codependent tendencies coming out that I didn't know I had. And it wasn't until that relationship that I was able to recognize areas inside myself that I needed to grow and work on. And so every relationship that we go into, whether it's with random strangers, with other church members that we interact with, coworkers, people that annoy the crap out of us, because we all have those people in our life, those are all opportunities for us to grow, to learn, and to become better, more authentic, more genuine, more healthy. So a little bit about myself. I'm currently a marriage and family therapist intern working in Chandler, Arizona at Clear Counseling. As an intern, I have a supervisor, Michelle, who helps to overview or oversee all my cases, all the clients that I get to see. However, at the end of this year, I'm graduating and I will be able to get my associate's license, and then it's still 2 more years of being supervised until I'm able to apply for full licensure. At that point, I don't need a supervisor anymore, and I can start private practice or just work under contract, work as a contractor under another individually licensed individual. So that's the plan, that's the path. And a huge passion of mine is connecting with people and taking information that I'm learning about in my studies, in my research, right? In my research methods course online that I'm taking. We're reading through some pretty dense things, but I want to take that information I'm learning and make it accessible. As a student and even as a therapist, as I keep up with my continuing education credits, I'm already doing the research, so why not share it with you and help keep you in the loop on growing, elevating yourself and your relationships. What makes a marriage and family therapist different is they look at the system. They take on a more holistic perspective, meaning they don't just look at your symptoms. When you come into therapy, hey, my child's acting up, please fix them. Or I'm really sad and depressed, I need help, I need to be fixed, right? So instead of focusing on those symptoms or what's wrong with the client, you're looking at all the factors that are interplaying and making those symptoms present. For example, it's not just a chemical imbalance or a biological factor, and it's not even just parenting or relationships with friends, but it can be culture, it could be society, it could be messages that you're hearing and believing, but then when your reality isn't measuring up to that, it can create this dissonance, this disconnection. It can create a lot of problems. Or you can simply be hearing unrealistic messages and have these expectations put on you that are simply not realistic to live up to. And you don't know, right? And that's what therapy does, is it explores all of those different influences to your current state, and it helps you explore creative solutions that you might not have thought of on your own simply because you're not aware of them or felt restrained in one way or the other. So far in my internship, I've had the opportunity to work with individuals one-on-one, and I do enjoy it. I do love it, but I've noticed that I get to learn a lot more about them when I see them interacting in relationships, when we bring in their partner or when we bring in their whole family and I get to see them interact with their family members. I suddenly get a much more clear picture because certain parts of ourselves only come out in relationships with others, right? In this system, certain parts of me only come out when I'm with my dad or mom, or only come out when I'm with a family member that no one else gets to see. And so when I see these spouses interacting with each other and see these interaction cycles, it gives me such a broader view of that person and how they see their worth, their role, how they see other people's worth and roles, and how that affects their interactions. And you don't get to see those on their own. And so a lot of times I get to meet with some lovely teenagers and their parents are making them come. So when you are seeing them, they don't want to be there. They flat out tell you, I don't think I need therapy. I don't want to be here. and I'm not a problem. My parents think I'm a problem, but like I'm fine, everything's fine. And yeah, it is. In and of themselves, when I'm talking with them and relating with them, I get to see a lot of maturity and a lot of ways that they're seeking independence and they're seeking approval, and it's all normal for their age, natural and beautiful. And I'm not seeing any of these problems that their parents are saying, and that's because those problems manifest specifically in the relationship they have with their parents. And that's the funny thing, right? Parents are like, oh, my teenagers, if only you could see how they act at home when they're out with friends or they're out with their friends' families, like they're perfect little angels. You don't get to see all these terrible symptoms and signs and bad behaviors coming out that we get to see at home. Well, newsflash, that's because you're part of the problem. Unfortunately, you're part of the system that, whether how you're responding to them or relating to them or disciplining them, whatever you're doing, and you don't even necessarily know what you're doing and you're not meaning to do it, but whatever you're doing is making them or eliciting that behavior in them that they're not going to be doing with anyone else because those other people aren't relating to them like you are. They are not having the same expectations or demands or interactions that you're having with them. And so I can for sure see that teenager and talk with them and build a healthy relationship with them, use some psychoeducation, teach them some life skills, help them as they're adjusting into adulthood to be more independent, to learn some coping skills. However, if we're really going to get at the root of the problem, the whole system needs to change. You can't just take one part of the family out and try to fix them and change them and then put them back into the family and expect that to stay, because how they've learned to cope and survive in the family, all of those instincts they have are going to come back out as soon as you put them back in the same system. And so imagine you are going shark diving. Okay, so you have your mask on so you can breathe underwater, and you're in a cage so you're protected, and you're put underwater and there's a bunch of sharks around. And you're like, oh, this is pretty cool. Like, these are really cool sharks. Maybe it's a little scary. Some of them are coming up pretty close. And suddenly you notice that the latch on one of the sides is loose. And suddenly you're in full panic mode because these sharks can have access to you. They can come in if they notice that that gate is loose and it opens up enough. And so suddenly you start behaving in ways you might not otherwise. You're trained to have, deep, relaxed breaths to conserve air, but suddenly you're panicking, you can't breathe, you're wasting air, you're doing things that aren't logical because you're flooded with all of these emotions of fight or flight. You're scared, you're terrified. And so like, why are you doing that? Let's take you out and re-lecture you on how to breathe properly and give you some proper scuba diving training, whatever, and then put you back in that cage so that you can behave normally and properly and appropriately. But guess what? That cage is still loose. Those sharks still have access. Even with all that training, guess what that individual is going to do again? Start panicking, start having trouble breathing, all of those same things. That's what it's like in a family, right? You have this system of interactions that are normal. Your dad typically interacts with you in a certain way. Maybe he puts you down a lot. Maybe he insults you in playful ways that still hurt deep down. Or maybe mom has a yelling problem. Or maybe mom withdraws emotionally. Mom and dad aren't there for you emotionally. And so even though you've learned all of these healthy skills one-on-one with your therapist, as soon as you're put back into that system, they're not acting, your parents aren't acting how they should, quote unquote, because guess what? They're not perfect. There's no perfect parents. And so you resort to old behaviors. You resort to tantrums to gain their attention. Or you resort to withdrawing because they're too involved. They're overwhelming you. They're too much in your Kool-Aid, and you're like, hey, I need to work on my independence, right? There's so many relational dynamics and factors. And so when you take the flower out of the forest to fix it, but then put it back in the same poisoned environment, it's going to start to get poisoned again. So that's kind of a bleak view because I've basically just compared families to sharks and poisoned forests. And that's not how I view families at all. I think families are beautiful. I think that families are so central to our being here on earth, right? I believe families are God's plan for us, that they are environments that are safe for us to grow and learn and experience the world. I believe all of that. And yet, I also believe that we live in a fallen world, that we're not perfect, that the people around us are not perfect. And because of that, we're going to hurt other people, and other people are going to hurt us without meaning to, but sometimes purposefully. Sometimes you purposely push your brother's buttons, or they purposely push your buttons, because we're not perfect. And so I like to take that realistic view of, yes, families are beautiful. They're worth it. They're incredible. There are so many strengths in families. And let's also talk about the weaknesses. Let's also recognize the areas for growth and improvement. The purpose is not to point out those weaknesses to then exploit them or make fun of them or make the person feel guilty for having them. It's simply let's recognize them so that we can slowly work on them. We don't need to be perfect. In fact, we're probably definitely never going to be perfect, but we can continually improve little by little each day to elevate ourselves and elevate the way we interact in relationships. And it's a huge, daunting task that we don't have to take on alone. And that's the beauty of it. We can create this community to help each other become our best selves, to support each other when we're weak, to lift each other up when we're down, to mourn with each other and sit in the lows together until we're able to rise up. And that's what I want to create here. A community supporting, uplifting, loving each other, and dedicated to improving and becoming just a little bit better each and every day.